Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the bright city of New York, where steel towers touch the sky and wealth is displayed without shame, lived Ethan Wallace, a millionaire renowned for his arrogance. Heir to a financial empire, he believed himself superior to everyone, especially those he considered useless to society. One evening, at a charity gala organized to help the needy, he met a discreet woman, Amelia Carter, a 28-year-old waitress, exhausted by life but still dignified in her gestures and her gaze. She had come to serve the guests, not to be one of them. Yet, her composure, her grace despite her poverty, and the sincerity of her smile intrigued Ethan. He gazed at her for a long time, amused. When she accidentally spilled some wine on her expensive suit, all eyes turned to her. Silence fell. But instead of reprimanding her, Ethan smiled coldly and said, "You're in luck. I love surprises. Come to my place for dinner tomorrow night." The entire room stared at her. A waitress invited to dinner by a multimillionaire? The idea seemed absurd, almost humiliating. Amelia, flustered, hesitated. But he insisted, his tone leaving no room for refusal. She agreed, unaware that Ethan had a very specific intention, to humiliate her publicly, to make her feel the unbridgeable distance between their worlds. He wanted to entertain himself at her expense, surrounded by his rich and mocking friends. But what he didn't know was that this dinner was about to take a turn he could never have imagined. For behind Amelia's modest clothes hid a past he would never have dared to confront, and a truth capable of shattering his pride. The following evening, Amelia Carter stood before the vast black gate of an imposing architectural mansion, lost in the heart of the upscale Upper East Side neighborhood. Her hands trembling, she tightened her worn coat around herself. The evening drizzle plastered her hair to her forehead, but she held firm. She had never set foot in a place like this. The marble columns, the golden lights, the luxury cars parked in the driveway, everything exuded an inaccessible wealth. The guard at the entrance sized her up skeptically. "Your name?" he asked curtly. "Amelia Carter." "Mr. Wallace invited me," she replied hesitantly. The guard raised an eyebrow, then, after a brief phone call, opened the gate with a mechanical gesture. "Come in." The sound of her footsteps echoed on the stone slabs as she walked along the long path leading to the main gate. When it opened, a butler dressed in black greeted him with a forced smile. "Miss Carter, Mr. Wallace is waiting for you." She entered. The entrance hall was immense, crystal chandeliers, paintings by masters, a monumental staircase. Every detail seemed to whisper to her that she didn't belong. In the large living room, Ethan Wallace stood by the fire, a glass of wine in his hand. He wore a tailored suit and a smug smile. Around him, several guests, men and women in evening wear, were chatting in hushed tones, sometimes laughing while glancing at her out of the corner of their eye. "Ah, there's our guest of honor," Ethan exclaimed theatrically. Amelia, feeling uneasy, replied politely. "Good evening, Mr. Wallace. You are ravishing, truly," he said, feigning gallantry. Then, turning to his friends. "You see, I told you she had natural charm. No need for diamonds to shine." A muffled laugh could be heard behind her. Amelia felt her cheeks flush, but she kept her head held high. Ethan approached, extended his arm, and added, "Allow me to show you my home. After all, it's not every day that a waitress gets to see the inside of a mansion, is it?" The guests burst out laughing. Amelia felt the trap closing. But she merely smiled weakly. "Perhaps, Mr. Wallace. But I know how to recognize beauty, whether it is in a house or in a gesture." This response momentarily silenced the room. Ethan forced a smile, surprised by his own repartee. "Interesting," he murmured. "Let's go to dinner." The table was set as if for a royal banquet. Fine porcelain, silver cutlery, sparkling candlesticks. Amelia took her seat next to Ethan, under the curious gaze of the other guests. Throughout the meal, the questions became increasingly cruel. Have you been working in the restaurant industry for a long time? How much do you earn, if you don't mind me asking? Have you ever tasted caviar, Miss Carter? Ethan watched, amused, as Amelia's discomfort grew. He wanted to push her to the limit, to see her lose her dignity. But against all expectations, she remained calm. She responded to every provocation with gentleness, never stooping to such a low level. And as the meal progressed, something changed in the atmosphere. Awkwardness was setting in on Ethan's side. For despite the wealth that surrounded her, it was she who exuded true nobility. Dinner continued in a strange, almost oppressive atmosphere. The guests were still laughing, but their laughter seemed forced. Ethan, despite being the master of the game, was beginning to feel something slipping from his grasp. Amelia, for her part, remained upright and polite, but her gaze was different, neither submissive nor fearful. A tranquil light was reflected in it, as if nothing could touch her. Ethan emptied his glass of wine and decided to regain control. He rose slowly, clinked his fork against the crystal, and declared, "My friends, I think it's time to liven up the evening a little." The guests sat up, intrigued. "You see," he said, "tonight I wanted to do an experiment. To invite someone, from another world." He fixed his gaze on Amelia, who stared at him without a word. A woman of the people, a waitress, in the house of a millionaire. I wanted to see if grace could exist without education, if poverty could mingle with elegance. Murmurs rippled through the table. Some snickered, others lowered their eyes in embarrassment. Amelia, she, remained still. "So, Amelia," Ethan continued, feigning gentleness, "tell us, how are you experiencing being here, surrounded by people so different from you?" A silence fell. They were all waiting for her to collapse, to tremble, to lose her composure. But Amelia simply took a deep breath, put down her towel, and replied in a calm voice. "Different? Perhaps. But I don't believe a person's worth depends on the size of their house or the price of their watch." She paused, then added softly, "What really sets us apart is what we do when no one is watching." The silence became absolute. Even the candles seemed to flicker. Ethan felt a twinge of annoyance cross his heart. "Charming speech," he said dryly. "But here, we like things to be done. Look, I have something for you." He signaled to a servant, who brought a small velvet box. Amelia frowned. "Open up," Ethan insisted. She complied. Inside, a sparkling necklace, undoubtedly of inestimable value. "This is for you," he said. "A souvenir, from your first real night out." The tone, falsely generous, betrayed contempt. The guests understood immediately, it was a staged event to humiliate him. But instead of becoming flustered, Amelia gently closed the box, placed it in front of him, and replied, "Thank you, Mr. Wallace. But I don't wear what doesn't make sense." Ethan grits his teeth. "You're refusing a piece of jewelry that's worth more than your apartment?" "I prefer to keep my dignity. It's priceless." A shiver ran through the room. Then a woman, Ethan's friend, interrupted with a nervous laugh. "Come on, it's just a game." But Amelia stood up slowly, her eyes now fixed on those of the millionaire. "A game? Perhaps for you. Not for me. Because what you call a game, Mr. Wallace, is the real life of those you despise." His words echoed through the room like a slap in the face. Ethan tried to answer, but remained silent. His confidence was crumbling. Part of him wanted to tell her to leave, the other part wanted to understand why she wouldn't give in. Amelia grabbed her coat, ready to leave the room, when suddenly a voice from the back slowly spoke. "Ethan, maybe you should tell her who she really is." All eyes turned to an old man sitting at the end of the table, Charles Wallace, Ethan's father. His face was serious. Ethan turned pale instantly. An icy silence fell over the room. All the guests stared at the old man, Charles Wallace, sitting in his armchair at the end of the table. His voice, weak but firm, had been enough to break the atmosphere. Ethan, on the other hand, suddenly seemed uneasy, almost panicked. "Father," he murmured, "this is not the time." "On the contrary," replied Charles curtly. "This is exactly the right time." Amelia, confused, stopped at the threshold of the living room. She still didn't understand why the patriarch of the Wallace family was addressing her with a look full of respect, almost tenderness. Charles stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. "Miss Carter, I never thought we'd see each other again." Amelia blinked, stunned. You know me?" "Yes," he replied simply. "You were Margaret Carter's daughter, weren't you?" The name made Ethan jump. "No, it's not possible," he stammered. "Oh yes," said his father, staring sternly at his son. "She's the daughter of the woman who saved your life, Ethan." The room suddenly became icy cold. The guests exchanged nervous glances, not understanding the gravity of the scene. Charles continued, his voice trembling but clear. 20 years ago, during the fire at the Wallace factory, you were trapped by the flames. It was Margaret Carter, Amelia's mother, a simple factory worker, who went in without hesitation to save you. She pulled you out, before succumbing to the smoke herself. Amelia lowered her eyes. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks. "My mother," she murmured. "I was only 8 years old." Ethan remained petrified, unable to speak. His face lost all color. He remembered. Yes, he remembered the woman who had carried him to the exit, covered in burns, while he cried in her arms. He had never known his name. And now he had just humiliated his daughter. Charles continued, with a mixture of pain and anger. "When I learned that she had died saving you, I wanted to help her daughter. I entrusted the mission to your charity service, the one you were running at the time." He paused. "You told me you never found any trace of him." Ethan felt a terrible weight crushing his chest. He understood everything. He had ignored the letters, closed the files, too preoccupied with his image and his social events. And tonight, out of pure vanity, he had wanted to humiliate the one to whom he owed his own life. No one spoke. The guests lowered their heads in shame. Amelia, for her part, remained standing, dignified, despite her tears. Charles approached her and gently took her hand. "Miss Carter, I owe you my apologies. And so does my son." Ethan stood up slowly, his gaze vacant. He advanced towards her, each step being a struggle. "Amelia. The words refused to come out. Her voice trembled. "I didn't know. I didn't know who you were." Amelia looked him straight in the eyes. "It's not what you didn't know that hurts me, Mr. Wallace. It's what you didn't want to know." One sentence, simple but devastating. Ethan lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. Charles Wallace, in a deep voice, concluded. "Ethan, this dinner was supposed to be a lesson in humility for you. Tonight, you are discovering the value of a soul you tried to trample on." Amelia prepared to leave. But before going through the door, she turned around one last time. "You invited me to humiliate me. I thank you. Because tonight, it's not me who lost something, it's you." She left, leaving behind a heavy silence, and a broken man. Wallace Manor was plunged into a heavy silence. The guests left one by one, fleeing the shame and discomfort of the scandal. Only Ethan and his father remained, alone in the vast, now empty dining room. The candles had gone out, and the echo of Amelia's last words still resonated in the air. "It's not me who lost something, it's you." Ethan stared at the necklace she had refused, still lying on the table. He had never felt so miserable. He, the man who thought he controlled everything, had just discovered that his wealth, his parties, and his arrogance were only a fragile veneer, a mask hiding an immense void. Charles, his father, broke the silence. "Now you understand, don't you?" Ethan raised his eyes, his gaze heavy with remorse. "Yes. I understand that I forgot the most important thing." "What you did tonight is unforgivable," Charles replied calmly. But it's not too late to try to make amends. These simple words planted a seed in Ethan's heart. He spent the night without sleeping, haunted by Amelia's face, by his mother's silent kindness, and by the shame of his behavior. A few days later. One cold morning, Amelia, returning to her job in a small cafe in the Bronx, heard the ringing of the bell above the door. When she looked up, her heart sank. Ethan Wallace was standing there, simply dressed, without a suit or arrogance. He was holding a cardboard box in his hands. She frowned, suspicious. "What are you doing here?" "I'm not here to apologize again," he said softly. "Words wouldn't be enough. I've come to give you back what is rightfully yours." He placed the box on the counter. Inside, files, official papers, and a key. "This is the house that my foundation bought 10 years ago. It used to be your mother's. I had it renovated. It's yours now." Amelia's eyes widened, unable to speak. Ethan continued, his voice trembling. "I have reopened the fund to help the families of the victims of the Wallace factory. And I have named it the Margaret Carter Fund. Your mother deserves to have her name live on for what she did." The cafe's customers, silent, watched the scene with emotion. Amelia remained motionless for a few seconds, then murmured. "Are you trying to erase what you did?" "No," he replied. "Shame cannot be erased. But something good can be done with it." She looked at him for a long time. Her instinct told her he was sincere. "What you're doing is good," she said softly. "But don't do it for me. Do it to become a better person." Ethan lowered his eyes, nodding his head. "That's what I'm trying to do." Then, before leaving, he added. "You taught me something, Amelia. You reminded me that true wealth is not measured by what one possesses, but by what one respects." A few months later. A new plaque was unveiled at the entrance of a brand new community center. Margaret Carter Center, in honor of courage and dignity. Amelia, the guest of honor, cut the ribbon in front of an emotional crowd. In the audience, standing discreetly, was Ethan, away from the cameras, his eyes moist. For the first time in a long time, he felt neither powerful nor superior, but at peace. And when their eyes met from a distance, Amelia gave a slight smile. Not a smile of forgiveness, but of gratitude. The one you give to someone who has finally understood the value of a human soul.